Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Pleasure to welcome back to the program Elie Mystal, justice correspondent and columnist at The Nation magazine. Elie, always a pleasure.
Hey, Sam, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, all things
Emma,
considered.
what's up?
Hey, it's nothing much. Talking to you now.
Nothing much. Kind of like the Supreme Court and the Donald Trump immunity decision, right? Nothing much happening, apparently.
You know,
if there's any time pressure.
There's really nothing to talk about it except for, like, it sort of give away the game. It sort of gave away the game at the beginning, when they first said this. But this is a case that's been sitting on the desk for months now. And it's one thing to say, like, hey, we can't answer this in a week because this is a big deal. But you would think that, like, when they start announcing cases, we sort of prioritize this one because the guy's running for president and he's the nominee of the Republican Party.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care about protecting the democracy. I think that there are two issues going on here. One, they actively want to make sure that Trump has an opportunity to run for president without this Jack Smith possible conviction hanging over him, right? That is a political, partisan decision on the part of the 6 conservative justices. And I've tried to explain to people, it's beyond their desire to see Trump reelected is beyond just the normal partisan politics, or they're Republicans and they like Republicans. Understand, Clarence Thomas is old, right? He knows he's not going to be around forever. Samuel Alito, as much as we like to joke about Alito and the flag and his obviously cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs wife, one of the subtexts of these flag stories is how much they hate DC. And this has actually been underneath Alito's entire career. He hates DC. His wife hates DC. He doesn't actually like the job. He loves the power. He doesn't actually like the job, right? Alito is not a guy who wants to die in his chair in DC. He wants to be fishing with drug executives and going to Phillies games, right? Well, so for both Thomas and Alito, Trump winning is key to their life retirement plans.
And we should say that Martha Alito, in that conversation recorded by Lauren Windsor at that party, she said, I'm going to get back at them. And there's a 5-year statute of limitations for defamation. And so, like, if she thinks that she's going to be able to bring a defamation suit within 5 years, that is her signaling that they're going to be off the court within the next 4 or 5 years. The hope being Donald Trump gets elected, and that's the exit. And it makes perfect sense with Thomas and Alito. They, unlike, someone like Breyer or Ginsburg for that matter, or frankly, Sotomayor, they understand that this is a political thing, and I want to go out and give the opportunity to be replaced by someone exactly like me, if not worse.
The Republicans, and I was just researching this for a piece, the Republicans have had a majority on the Supreme Court since Earl Warren retired in 1969. All right, we think about the current kind of Republican control of the court as something relatively recent. Mitch McConnell, Merrick Garland. No. They've controlled the court since the 70s, right? Now, not all of the Republican appointments have been as hardcore right-wing extremists as the current version of it, right? But the Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices have been in the majority for the entirety of my natural life. And one of the reasons why is that they have been brutal, efficient, and strategic with their retirements.
Yeah.
Right. They understand when the white writing is on the wall and they get out at the opportune moments. The Democratic judges, the liberal justices, they don't. And I think part of the problem is this idea that each individual, I think this problem, I'm going to cast aspersions, but full no, I have not been imbued with lifetime power. Who knows how I might change should anybody tell me that that I can never be fired and genuflect to me as I walk down the aisle. But I think what happens, especially with the liberals, is that they get really invested in their own greatness, right? In their own selves, in their own indispensability. And they think, as Ginsburg thought, nobody could be like me. I'm Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Nobody could be like me. I'm Thurgood Marshall. Nobody could be like me. Perhaps now I'm Sonia Sotomayor. This is not a problem Republicans have. Republicans understand that they themselves are not special. Their vote is special. Right. So when the opportune moment comes, be it Anthony Kennedy, Sandra Day O'Connor, Clarence Thomas coming up if Trump wins, they step back and let the next generation of hardcore conservatives take their place. It is an asymmetrical war, and it's one of the wars that the liberals have lost hard over the past 50 years.
Is that indicative of the fact that the Republicans and conservative judicial activists have these major institutions that wield so much more power, where they can basically say, your time is up, buddy, we need a new fresh body in here, versus liberals and Democrats not having the same judicial processes? They're catching up a little now, but historically, like in terms of vetting these justices, where they can become almost celebrities as opposed to hired guns.
I think it's more that this is going to sound really rude, and I don't mean it as rude as it sounds. Republicans, they're basically the same three people, right? Like if you think about the Republican Party, you think about Republican justices, they are the same guy cut from the same socioeconomic cloth that believes a very small set of similar things. I mean, to not be rude, you can barely tell them apart, right? They all look the same to me. Whereas liberals with their big tent, I think our justices and our legal people in general just come from such varied backgrounds that it's hard to see yourself in the next generation, right? Like if you think about just going back to RBG, right? She wants to retire under the first woman president because she's sure that Hillary Clinton will appoint another strong woman in a way that she perhaps wasn't sure that a Barack Obama would. Now, there was no reason for her to worry about that, but you see what I'm saying? It's like that. And this goes through our whole judicial nominating and judge-making process. I've said many times, one of the reasons why the Republicans get to be the Republicans and the Federal Society has the power it does is because Leonard Leo can walk into all of the Republican constituencies and be like, hey, guys, trust me, I'm going to pick the judges, right? He can go to the NRA. Don't worry, I got your back. He can go to the religious right. I'm going to pick your judges. Flip that around to our side, right? Imagine me. I've got billions of dollars. I'm a smart guy. I'm like, I'm going to pick all the Democratic justices. And then I go to Sherilyn Ifill at the NAACP. And I'm like, hey, Sherilyn, I'm going to pick the judges. Send me your suggestions, right? And then I walk over to Lambada Legal. I'm like, hello, my fellow gays. I'm going to pick all the judges. Yes, I'm a cishet black guy. Don't worry about it. I got your back. And then I go to NARAL. I'm like, I'm going to pick all the judges. At some point, they're going to be like, who in the hell do you think you are? Right? Everybody in Democratic politics, it's like Little League baseball, man. Everybody gets to play. Everybody gets their turn at bat, whatever. Republicans, they're like a traveling basketball team. The 5 best players get to play. All the rest of y'all can sit on the bench.
And there's also this dynamic, which I think, we saw play out with Clarence Thomas, is where he wanted to retire and he was going around advertising to everybody, I need money. And all of a sudden, Leonard Leo shows up and it's like, I've got your new best friend. He's a billionaire. His name is Harlan Clarence. And then you guys, it's a love affair made in heaven. And Clarence Thomas has millions upon millions of dollars of benefit from this very close relationship he has with Harlan Crow. And I also say, what's also strikes me too is, that's one end of it. But the this notion of like retirement, the only other time we've seen anything like that was back in like the 1800s, late 1800s, where pensions were invented for judges to get them to retire at one point. Mm-hmm. Because, having a paid job at that point was a lot of value, but to get paid to not work is also a good thing for people.
For every federal court below the Supreme Court we have what's called senior status, right? A judge takes senior status. They keep their full salary. They can still sit on cases and issue opinions, but by being a senior person, they open up their seat so that the current president can replace them on the court. And this is, again, a place where Republicans on the lower circuits just outstrip the Democrats, because Republican judges on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, they will take senior status under Republican administrations, so their seat on the Fifth Circuit, on the Fourth Circuit, on the Third Circuit can be replaced by a Republican, whereas liberal judges, not only are they relatively bad at taking senior status, when they decide it's time to go, they'll go regardless of who happens to be president. So you had liberal judges literally taking senior status under the Trump administration, so that Trump replaced them with Republicans. And it was just like, this is why we lose, guys. This right here, this is why we lose.
All right. Well, let's. So in the meantime, they have a reason to keep Donald Trump in office. They know that the later that they come out with this ruling about immunity, the more they can sort of slow walk this prosecution and guaranteeing at least that Donald Trump has a shot at winning the presidency again.
But Sam, can I give you my one bit of hope here? Because
asteroid.
The giant meteors. I'll say. All right, here's my one bit of hope. The thing that we heard from oral arguments suggested that what the conservatives wanted to do, what the Alitos wanted to do, was remand the case back to Judge Chutkan for further fact-finding. A remand would extend the time almost indefinitely, and then, on remand, it would be reappealed. So, like, they could have gotten Trump through the election just with the remand decision. Now, I still think that that's the leader in the clubhouse, but my one ray of hope is that since remand does all the time wasting that they need, maybe it's taking so long because the conservatives lost remand. And now the only way Sam Alito can delay the trial is by delaying his dissent until the very last possible day. Maybe that's now his only way to delay it, because he lost the remand argument. Now, again, that is
speculation,
me,
right?
But hopping on some Care Bears and trying to, like a big dose of copium and candies and rainbows. My brain says, no, it's already gone. It's just going to be a remand, whatever. But like, if you wanted some Care Bear hope, that's my unicorn for you.
So that's John Roberts saying to Alito, do you have your dissent ready? And he's like, oh, geez, all this flag stuff. I promise I'll have it on Monday. And then Monday comes and he's like, you're not going to believe this. But the car, bro, what do you think? Like, extend this? This is going to come out like late July. We should say that when is the longest, like in this modern era, the latest thing I remember dropping is in like the first week of July. I don't remember any other cases going past that.
As long as I've been covering it, the court has never gone past July 4th. They shut it down by July 4th weekend. Now, technically, they don't have to, right? Like there's no rule that says they have to release opinions by the end of the term, by July 1st. They can what's called relist cases, which means that kind of set them up for future argument in October. They could just hold their decision until whenever. The Supreme Court can hold a decision for as long as it wants. There's no statutory rule for when they have to release their opinions. However, historically, traditionally, I've never seen them go past July 4th.
All right. That sounds, I guess we'll see.
Like this, my vacation starts July 4th. So I am counting on
you have similar motivated reasoning to those members of the court in terms of just in a different direction. All right, so let's talk about the bump stock stuff. We've had over the past couple of days a couple of big cases. The bump stock, which is basically a device that you put on a weapon more or less convert it. I mean, we're going to get into the semantics here of the whole thing, and I don't want to offend any homosexuals, but it turns it into a more or less a machine gun for all intents and purposes. And also this Mifepristone case. Let's start with the bump stocks. What this came out of in the wake of Parkland,
Las
Vegas, a Trump administration, right? I mean, this was a Trump rule. Yep.
Trump. This is gun control from MAGA, from Trump, because after the Las Vegas Music Festival shooting, where 60 people died and 400 people were injured in 10 minutes, where the guy shot off 1,000 rounds in 10 minutes using a bump stock. And what a bump stock does is convert your semi-automatic rifle into an automatic rifle. You pull the trigger, it bumps literally against your shoulder, and that kinetic action makes the trigger finger pull again. And so you pull once and you get a continuous rain of fire, just like a machine gun. Well, machine guns are already banned. Things that turn weapons into machine guns are already banned. Where the legal issue, according to the conservatives, was the way that the National Firearms Act is written. It says that a machine gun is something that fires a continuous round of bullets based on one function of the trigger. So is one function of the trigger the same as one pull of the trigger? And the way, just to get through all the semantics, the way that I kind of explained it is that the conservatives understood the case from the perspective of a gun. Right? As if you got to think of from the conservative perspective, the gun is like the candelabra in Beauty and the Beast, right? It has hopes and feelings and dreams and ideas. And from the gun's perspective, it's multiple functions of the trigger, even though it's happening, kinetically, very fast, right? From the shooter's perspective is where Sotomayor and the liberals decided to look at it, because the shooters are the people in this situation, right? Not the gun. From the shooter's perspective, you pull the trigger once and the gun continuously fires. So that was the legal breakdown. The six conservatives said, no, it's multiple functions of the trigger from the gun's perspective. The liberals said it's a single function of the trigger from the shooter's perspective. And the homosexuals won because they always win.
And I mean, it also seems to me that it might be relevant in terms of like the target, right? I mean, because like the reason why you ban, theoretically, it seems to me, a machine gun, and for that matter, not just a machine gun, but like a bazooka or a tank, in completely restricting my freedom to have those things, is because the damage that it can do. Right? Like, I mean, it's not because the shape of the bazooka is just, or whatever. It has to do with the damage that can be done.
Yeah.
The Las Vegas massacre was the single deadliest mass shooting in American history carried out by a single gunman. Do you know why it's still the single most deadliest shooting in American history? Because we banned the bump stocks. We endure a mass shooting in this country nearly every day. There have been 225, as of when I wrote this last week, 225 mass shootings in America this year in 2024. And the reason why, one of the reasons why, the death toll has not gotten to the point that it got to in Las Vegas is because we banned the very thing the Las Vegas shooter was using to kill everybody. But there was a really horrible part of the decision where Clarence Thomas, who wrote the majority opinion, basically extolled the virtues, the skill required to be a mass shooter, right? Because the whole point of banning bump stocks is that Stephen Paddock, the Las Vegas killer, was a 64-year-old man. And one of the arguments was that there's no way a 64-year-old man could kill that many people in 10 minutes without a machine gun, right? And Clarence Thomas was like, no. It actually takes a lot of skill. You have to aim and you have to do it. He literally had 2 paragraphs in his opinion where he was like, it takes a lot of skill to kill, to mass shoot. It's not the gun that's doing it. It's the skill of the shooter. And it's just, that's where we are in this country. And I try to point out to people that on guns, understand that the conservative majority on the Supreme Court, the extremists on the Supreme Court, are to the right of MAGA. Because, again, banning bump stocks, that was a Trump idea. That was a Trump Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm rule. For the banning bump stocks is extremely popular within both parties. It's these crazy amosexual gun nuts on the Supreme Court that have kind of twisted our country into this blood sport. And I just, until we do something about the conservative control over the Supreme Court, our children are dying. Our country will continue to suffer these tragedies as long as these people are allowed to hold power. They are to the right of even your local crazy conservative uncle.
You quoted legal commentator Joe Patrice summing up Alito's concurrence. He wrote, as I read from your piece, I appreciate that Alito took the time to write a concurrence to say, quote, obviously the legislative history and the common sense interpretation of this text would ban bump stocks, but instead, fuck you. That's basically, it captures sort of the disposition there. And I guess I don't know if there's much value in going through from a political perspective, but every ruling like this on this topic takes us further away from, because the way that that justices operate, particularly, frankly, center to the left, is that they wouldn't make these big leaps. They would have to undo each part. And so to undo a regime like this that has protected weapons so vigilantly, it will take years if we're ever in a position of having reasonable people who cannot tie themselves in pretzels to allow a machine gun. I mean, it's just like, I don't understand, like, why does a bazooka require that much more or less like training? Like, it's just, let us have a bazooka then.
One of the frustrating things is that when you hear Republicans talk about this ruling, they're like, well, Congress should just pass a law banning bump stocks and then we'll be fine. And the whole point is that Congress already banned machine guns in 1934. And the idea here is that every time Congress does act, which, as we both know, Sam, it takes a lot for Congress to do anything about guns. A lot, right? Every time they do finally somehow get over the finish line with a bill to do anything about gun violence, the Supreme Court cuts it off at the knees.
Yep.
And
They're
so,
actually bringing up that legislation, I think, today in the Senate to ban bump stocks.
Right.
All right.
And
well,
it won't pass the House because Republicans. But even if it did, the Supreme Court probably won't uphold it.
Yep.
Again, we're in a death loop with these people, and until we stop them, until we overpower them, I believe with court expansion, we will continue to be in a death loop with these people.
Okay, let's move to the Mifepristone case, because the Mifepristone case, on its face, looks like a win, and on some level it is in terms of access, at least in the short term, to Mifepristone. And something like 60% of abortions in this country are performed using Mifepristone. But there's going to be other implications from this ruling in terms of standing. Walk us through this case.
Yeah, so I'm on team. This was a good day. Right. And like, I understand that there are dark forces gathering, but this is a good decision. The standing argument. So standing is the concept of whether or not you have a right to sue somebody in the first place. Right. And so how do you get to a point where you have people who did not take Mifepristone, did not take the abortion pill, and doctors who did not prescribe the abortion pill? How do you get to a point where these people are suing the abortion pill? They ain't take it. Nobody forced them to take it. Why are you even here, right? And the argument, the actual argument from religious conservatives for why they could sue over the abortion pill was because women who take the abortion pill and had a bad experience with it, allegedly, are too ashamed of their choices because they're little girls They were too ashamed to sue for themselves. And so the religious people had to sue for them because the little ladies were too ashamed. And then when he got to the appellate court, to the Fifth Circuit, Fifth Circuit Judge James Ho said, there's another reason why they have standing. And that's because of the aesthetic injury that people like James Ho suffer when he can't see pregnant women and their bellies. He likes to look at pregnant women, in the wild, in their, natural habitat, as if they're in a zoo or a nature preserve. And so by taking away their pregnant bellies, it makes James Ho very sad. And that's why he had standing to sue. These two standing arguments were ridiculous. They were not unlegal, doesn't even kind of get into the scope of how dumb they were. And those are the two arguments that the Supreme Court unanimously rejected in this Mifepristone case. Now, does that mean nobody has standing? That's not true. And Republicans will figure out some way, probably through state action, like the state of Texas will sue. The Republicans will figure out some way. The Supreme Court never got to the merits of whether or not Mifepristone should be allowed or not, even though this is a drug that's been on the market for over 20 years, over 30 years in Europe. No complications, one of the safest way to get an abortion. No matter to them, they will find some other way to sue, and this case will come back to us again in the future. But I still think it's good that the Supreme Court rejected these ridiculous standing arguments because they're Republicans. They didn't have to reject them.
Right. And the longer that the drug is on the market here, the harder it is to sort of say, like, we still don't know what the implications are of this. But what of the argument that in some of the court's reasoning, they go further than saying, the idea that you can't see more pregnant women is, a little problematic, in terms of like you actually suffering some type of damage in which we're in a position to fix, right? That's the principle about torts, about, lawsuits that must exist, but that they also inhibited the standing of people who might say, for an environmental protection, I don't own a river, but I do suffer a consequence if a river is polluted, or broadly speaking, things are allowed to be polluted because it's part of the commons, for instance, or something like that. Like, what of that? Like, where do you see them attempting to bar citizens from the courthouse in the future?
Yes, that was part of the long game. You're absolutely right, Sam. That was part of the long game of this decision. It's one of the reasons why conservatives rejected this standing argument, because they don't like standing arguments generally. Like, they don't like people to have standing. And you brought up the environmental case. Neil Gorsuch, whose mother was the head of the EPA under Ronald Reagan and kind of the anti-EPA, like she hated the EPA. Neil Gorsuch's mom basically tried to destroy the EPA from the inside out. Neil Gorsuch hates environmental lawsuits, doesn't think they should be allowed. And so exactly the situation, again, I analogize what Ho is doing, is calling women like, manatees out in the wild. But if you actually wanted to see a manatee and you couldn't because some, Exxon was shoving oil up its butt, you now kind of can't sue Exxon for that, for taking away your actual manatees, right? Clarence Thomas's concurrence in this case was really attacked because, Clarence Thomas lives to like hate black people. Like, that's why he thinks he was put on this earth. Clarence Thomas's concurrence was really attacking the NAACP, right? So if I get, brutalized by a police officer, maybe I sue the cop, but maybe I get a whole bunch of people who were also brutalized by the police officers, and I say, hey, NAACP, would you sue the cops, right? Because I don't have money to do that lawsuit on myself. And so the NAACP would sue on my behalf, against police brutality. Clarence Thomas not specifically, but like very obviously attacked that kind of standing, right? To try to prevent organizations like the NAACP and NARAL and Planned Parenthood from suing on behalf of their clients. So there are all these kind of long time bombs, poison pills that the conservatives put into this decision, which will come to pass, will come due, again, if we allow conservatives to continue to control the Supreme Court for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Those will all happen, but I guess I'm not as worried about that in the context of this decision as others, simply because
they can do whatever they want anyways.
For 30 years, we're fucked anyway. Like, you can't come back from that anyway. They did it in this case. They would do it in some other case when they had the opportunity. The problem is conservative control, at least for the next few months, even. The most safe and most access way to get an abortion is still available. The decision, even if it has all these dark motives, long game things, will save lives.
Right. Very good point. All right, let's before I want to just talk briefly about your 2025 piece about the DOJ, but we've got a lot of cases that are extant. Obviously, the immunity case, we touched on that. What is the other one that you are like ready? It's the Chevron Doctrine.
Yeah. So the whole Chevron deference is the concept that Congress passes a law, right? A Clean Air Act, a Clean Water Act, right? And then it's up to the executive agencies to enforce those laws. So when they are trying to enforce the Clean Air Act, the EPA will make additional regulations, right? When Congress passes a financial law, it's up to the SEC to make additional regulations to enforce that law. Chevron deference is the concept that the courts, especially the Supreme Court, should defer to the judgment of the executive agencies about what Congress wanted to do and not make the judgment for themselves. The conservatives obviously hate Chevron deference. They think the courts should have all the power. We were talking about Neil Gorsuch's history with the EPA. This is direct. This is a one-to-one connection from what his mom tried to do to what he's trying to do. He doesn't think the EPA should get to decide what clean air is. He thinks Neil Gorsuch gets to decide how much lead or mercury or whatever is allowed to be in the air. He thinks that's a court decision, not a EPA decision. And from oral arguments, it felt like they were going to win. It felt like
we should say this is the Loper case. There's two of them, right?
Loper Bright and Relentless it's like a couple of cases,
right? Raimondo, I think it is.
Yeah.
Okay, and now, the irony, too, is that if I remember correctly, the Chevron deference doctrine was developed in the case that his mom basically brought because they wanted to not do their job, essentially. The EPA did. I mean, and we've seen this. We saw this during the Trump administration with what's-his-face from Oklahoma who was brought in, Pruitt. Pruitt was a pro at suing the EPA and keeping them from doing their job. And then he got ahead of the EPA and it was basically the opposite. We're just not going to do anything and people are going to have to sue us to get us to do our job. She was operating in that fashion. And basically the court said, no, you got to defer. If the EPA decides that they're not going to uphold the laws in the way that you want them to, it's okay with them. But it flips now because they're in control of this stuff.
Exactly. Back during the Reagan administration, the Republicans controlled the executive agencies, so they wanted the executive agencies to make all the decisions, right? Now, Republicans control the Supreme Court. They want the Supreme Court to make all the decisions. All they want is the power. All they want is the power to make sure that polluters are safe from regulation. That's the whole point. You know how George W. Bush started a war against a country that didn't attack us in Iraq to finish what his daddy started? Like, Chevron deference is Neil Gorsuch's Saddam Hussein, right? Like, he's trying to finish what his mama started, and kill the EPA.
That case will be coming up in the next week or two. Yeah, I think hopefully our audience, we've been talking about the Chevron Doctrine for 5 or 6 years, and hopefully they, people are terrified. That's what we're here for.
Tell your kids about it, because like again, Chevron deference is so tied to whether or not we're allowed to have an environmental regulations that like this is literally what people should be voting on, right? Because Neil Gorsuch, he's gonna be dead by the time the bill comes due on what he does on the Supreme Court. But my kids who are 11 and 8, they will be the ones that have to suffer from it. And so I hope that younger people with the ability to vote will think about these things before they head to the polls.
Yep. One more thing to think about. Trump, the way that he intends to deal with the DOJ and the FBI. And I read your piece, and the best part about it was like, you were like, I'm all for abolishing the FBI, but this is not what this is about. This is about just fully like making it essentially the personal security division of, a Trump-controlled RNC, essentially.
Right? Because the FBI, look, I'm no fan of the FBI, right? Like I'm no fan of the surveillance state. I know what the FBI can do, right? But Trump's version of it is not to destroy it. It's to weaponize it even further. One of the things, it's a little small point, but think about it this way. One of their key plans in the Project 2025 MAGA fascist takeover is to fire all of the lawyers who work for the FBI. Well, what did the lawyers do for the FBI other than tell the FBI, buddy, you can't do that. But there's
right.
Fourth Amendment, Constitution, you can't do. And then fire those guys. Fire the people who are in charge of restraining the FBI so it can be fully deployed against MAGA's enemies, which include women, people of color, and especially immigrants. That's the whole plan, to put the FBI, to put the DOJ on offense, right? They want the Civil Rights Division, the Division of Civil Rights in the DOJ. They don't want them to defend civil rights. They want them to defend white supremacy. They want them to literally sue companies who have diversity and inclusion programs, right? To have DEI programs. That's what they want to sue. They want the Civil Rights Division to be worried about the civil rights of white folks who are in the majority and control all three branches of government. That's their kind of thought process there. So it's crazy, but it's also, and I tried to put this in the piece, Sam, it's so petty. Like, these people are so petty. They had whole screeds about Hunter Biden's laptop and penis. Like, they're so focused on that, right? They're so concerned about, like, and every time I yell at a teacher, somebody says I'm the asshole. Like, it's almost like the Reddit "Am I the asshole" thread swing through a MAGA lens and put into a document for how to remake the DOJ. And it's scary and terrifying, but it's also just so small. These people are so small.
I mean, we saw this with the Alito stuff, where Martha Alito is like, my husband, I mean, the subtext is, my husband is one of maybe the 12 of the most powerful people in the world in terms of like having the implications to make a decision and impact extra lives. And I can't wait until he retires so that I can fly whatever flag I want, because of those people across the lagoon have a pride flag. Like, this is insanity. The aggrievement is just, it's insanity.
It would be funny if they weren't powerful, right? It'd be funny if they weren't so dangerous, but like, their aggrievements turn into nightmares for the rest of us, right? Their petty grievances become our lived reality. And it's ridiculous that they have so much power, but they are some small-minded folks, man.
Elie Mystal, we will put a link to your pieces in The Nation. People should be checking that on a regular basis, because we could have Thursday and Friday, more Supreme Court cases are dropping. I imagine we'll have some more the following week as well. And then somewhere around 2028, they'll get to the Trump immunity question. And so,
and hopefully that'll be done so I can stop caring about them for the 4th of July. My only goal.
Elie Mystal, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Have a nice one.
Thanks so much.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.